And live from France in Brussels, it's ZN Live. And today I am very excited to have a special guest that is Stephen Massey, who is an experienced public affairs advisor. He's been involved in a number of different initiatives. One of them that I will come back to in a second, which is about setting up a public affairs community online using Discord. Very interested to find out more about this. This, by the way, is episode 367. That's 367, brought to you by ZN, the OG of digital agencies. But first, I have Irem, who is the senior director at ZN. And I just want to say happy Women's Day, happy International Women's Day. And we have been active in supporting an initiative. And Irem, tell us a little bit more about what we're doing there.
Yes, happy International Women's Day to all of our watchers and listeners. ZN is partnering for the fifth time for the fifth edition of Women Who Advance Association Awards. And this is an initiative looking to spotlight, acknowledge, and award extraordinary female voices within the EU and international association community. Not only associations themselves, but also agencies and consultants that work with associations as well. And they want to particularly consider women who help advance their organizations by inspiring inclusion, those that value diversity, and act as a catalyst to improve and progress. And yeah, we are very proud to be sponsoring and partnering with this initiative. And the award ceremony will be held next week. So we are looking forward to seeing all the spotlighted women.
Fantastic. And of course, we're going to be talking a lot about this on our channels. And we have some amazing women at ZN who do some fantastic work on the creative side, as well as the client side, on the strategic side. So amazing talent there. And that talent needs to get a lot more visibility. Now, turning to Stephen, I'm so happy to meet you actually live. We've been exchanging conversations on LinkedIn and on Discord. Now, you have recently started a public affairs community on Discord. When you reached out to talk about your plans, I thought this sounded really interesting, but I was not sure that Discord would be an easy place for public affairs communicators to get involved. So I know that there are I saw 297 people on the community, which is pretty impressive. So how has it been, and how successful do you consider the community and Discord as a tool?
Well, thank you firstly, ZN team, for the invitation to speak today. And yeah, it's been interesting setting up the Discord community. I suppose the reason why I set it up initially was because I launched a newsletter about 6 months or so ago, also called Inside Corporate Affairs, and I published that on LinkedIn. It's a newsletter that's orientated around building better corporate affairs and communications functions. And that newsletter has attracted a followership of over 3,000. So I was thinking, how best can I get this community, because that's what it is, to speak to each other rather than just reading a newsletter. How can I get that community to talk to one another, because they have a shared interest? And if I could stimulate conversations between them in a way, it could help in ways that I couldn't do alone. So I looked into what's the best way to develop a community around that. I was a little bit familiar with Discord as an app. And I contrasted that to potentially setting up a group on LinkedIn. And I felt that Discord was the way to go in how it encourages people to communicate, and then how some of the content is a little bit stickier. You know, when you think about LinkedIn, and I love LinkedIn because it's, I'd say it's my favorite app and my favorite social media that I engage in. But when it comes to groups, quite often the groups that you form on LinkedIn, they're kind of dead groups. Not a lot of people engage in them. And I think LinkedIn could do a lot more to facilitate community engagement through those groups. Another challenge with LinkedIn is that when you post something, even if it resonates for a while, it tends to go away and disappear. And what that does is it creates a lot of fragmented conversations. Whereas if you bring something together in specific channels, like the way Discord allows you to do, it can allow people to have very focused conversations and allow people to connect a little bit more, even if they're not directly connected on LinkedIn or even a secondary degree connection. So it's been I'd say an experiment, bringing people together to form that community. And the focus is on sharing best practices, sharing insights, and on sharing policy intelligence amongst professionals. It's been challenging though too. And if we want to talk about some of the challenges, firstly, a lot of people don't want another social media app on their phone that they need to check. So migrating people from LinkedIn over to Discord is one of the primary challenges. If you talk about a community of over 3,000 that follow the newsletter, only 300 are on the community on Discord. That's only 10% of that. So that is a big barrier in getting people across. And when you're looking at a community like that, I think it's 20% of Twitter, or we should call it X now, users produce about 80% of the content. So you need a group that's engaged, because if only 20% are going to be the primary engagers and posters on a community like that, then that whittles it down to a smaller group as well. And you have to encourage that. I think I made some mistakes as well. When I launched the Discord channel, there's a lot of channels within it. I have channels for each country, so people can focus in on public affairs in Ireland, public affairs in Brussels, public affairs in Romania. And I have regional channels and channels for all different kinds of best practices, from strategic communications to stakeholder engagement. And of course, then there's channels for industry areas. That's all well and good if you've got a big community, but if you've got a smaller group, it's probably better to focus the conversations on specific areas. So there's some of the kind of the teething challenges with it that will be interesting to look at, because I think what we might do is consolidate some of the channels down, focus the conversations more, and really kind of tie the group together so that it can grow from this point.
Yeah, I was very impressed. I thought you did a very, you were very active in the launch, kind of reaching out, asking people to do it. And I think it delivered an initial kind of real interest. And I see that a lot of people are still posting things and kind of talking there. I imagine, as you said, that the friction going from LinkedIn to Discord means that you lose a lot of people, who just can't be bothered to make the move, or it's too much for them to focus on the two. Now, I was thinking that if you had a highlight section on LinkedIn saying, hey, here are the big Discord discussions this week or something like that, that might help people understand. And I think it's a good thing to explore. And as I said, as long as there are people in the community who are live, that's great. Now, this must all take quite a bit of time for you. So I have a question, which is, why are you doing this? I'm sure, you're a passionate professional, but it must take a lot of time. What is the prime justification for you to do that? Maybe you can give us an idea of how much time it takes you to manage this, and what do you get out of it, and why do you think the world needs another public affairs community?
Well, initial setup took time to understand Discord, because I was a learner in many respects as well. And for the most part, it's actually a younger generation that uses Discord.
Yeah.
So there was a learning curve involved in figuring out how I could set it up in the best way. There's also bots and applications that you can build into Discord. So there's a lot of room for growth within how Discord functions and can be used. But why do I do it? It's because I think I'm a natural community builder. And I love the whole discipline of public affairs, communications, and corporate affairs. So I think a passion for that and for bringing people together is something that I've had for some time. And when people come together and discuss how we do things, how we professionalize the whole practice of corporate affairs, public affairs, and communications, you can really see it having an impact on people and the way that they do their jobs. When you share insights and they learn and they start to develop and bring those in and say, I could use this, or I could use that. It's great to see. Since launching it, I have taken a small step back, because I'm a real believer that the community needs to be community driven. And that's what I'd like it to evolve to, so that what happens on it is a space that is self-generated. So I'm taking a little bit of time to see how it's being used and how it facilitates engagement before I change things and before I make another push towards, I suppose, engagement and reinforcement of the community.
Something you've mentioned, especially about the community 7, how do you allow for community to happen on digital platforms completely? And what are the effective measures or tactics that you can use or you would advise corporates to use to make today's communication on online channels more effective and efficient?
Yeah, I think that's a complicated question, and when we look at the fallout or how the world has changed since COVID, we went from primarily a kind of a traditional in-person. Digital was growing, but when COVID happened, it really pushed us all to engage digitally in a much greater way. A lot of our meetings they went to Zoom. There's so much virtual communication that happens there, and I suppose since then people have gotten used to connecting digitally, and they've become more at ease with it. But in doing so, the best approach really is having a blended approach to it, because whatever you communicate digitally or online, you want to really reinforce that through traditional communications and through meetings with people. So when you have the opportunity to attend conferences and networking events, that's a great way to bring people together and to reaffirm the relationships that they may have connected online. I know that there have been a lot of people I've had meetings with and then attended events in Brussels, and just getting the chance to shake someone's hand, it really brings things together. And I think if professionals think about a blended approach to communications, they really can get the best out of both worlds.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And when we're working on events with our clients, we always say, look, think about the event as part of a story which exists online, in the room, and then online again. And actually, you can do a lot of the follow-up and perhaps deeper discussions online, but it's a great way to, but you have to connect the two. I think the fundamental mistake people do is to actually have a big, massive event, and then everybody goes to sleep and there's no energy left to really have a conversation, whereas the real conversations, I think, can happen after, but it's great to have that kind of face-to-face connection. Now, with all that knowledge you have, sorry, you want to jump in?
I was just going to say, with something like Discord, if it builds to a point, and there's actually quite a good number of individuals in Brussels as a space, because Brussels naturally is what I call a policy center. It's a community where people come together. The same with Washington, D.C., but if you can use a blended approach to community development, there could be meetups as well from the groups, and that can, again, solidify the bonds that bring people together.
Yeah, and I'd like to suggest, a Discord drink, so that you can actually just get people together and share face-to-face experiences based on the conversations that started online. So happy to host a drink at some point if you're interested. But what I wanted to come back to is, by seeing all these discussions, by working on your newsletter, it gives you a lot of ideas on what the key trends, the key challenges this community is facing. So what would you say in 2024 are the big challenges that the public affairs community is facing? There's an election coming up, a lot of very complex issues. What is emerging from your analysis and looking at the content and the comments that you're seeing?
Well, the work that I do, really, I describe it as management consulting for corporate affairs and for public affairs. I spend a lot of time having conversations with leaders and looking inside their corporate affairs functions to see what's working and what's not working. And there's both an internal and an external element to that. I think the myth or the perception of people in our profession is that they're engaging externally and communicating externally the whole time. But that's not entirely true. What's not seen, or a lot of the work that's the hidden iceberg in public affairs, is so much internal engagement, because they need to understand what the corporate and organizational strategy is, and then how they can best use external communications to advance that. So a lot of the challenges are quite often internal focused. It's strategic alignment. It's communicating with the right people across departments and functions so that you know what their problems and challenges are, and also communicating to them what it is that corporate affairs, public affairs can do to help them. Because there's also a miscommunication and a misunderstanding of what the public and government affairs functions do. And when internal stakeholders know and understand that, they can leverage it more effectively. It also helps then in getting resources, the resources that you need to engage. And that could be as simple as just someone's time and involvement. Getting policy specialists and technical experts involved in policy communications can be really vital. And of course, it also helps with financial resources, because when the CEO knows the the extent of corporate affairs and what it can achieve for an organization, they're more likely to invest in it over the long term.
Yeah. Now, I fully agree with you, and I think internal buy-in is probably the most important element of any successful campaign. I think mindset is also critical, because often you have to tell people that they need to try a different story or try a different channel, and this is something that there's a lot of reluctance in especially in conservative organizations. Coming to the channels, as you said, Discord is a pretty kind of hip channel. We hear about hacks on Discords and gaming communities on Discord. Now, in terms of the conversation and the channels, there's another big one in Brussels, of course, which is X versus LinkedIn versus Threads versus Blue Sky. We, as a digital comms agency, have to try them all. So we're constantly looking at what's working, what's not working. One of the surprise findings, we thought, we did a little research a month ago, and we found that the X conversation was still actually very, very strong. Everybody hates X nowadays. It's pretty much the main messages. We don't like Elon Musk. We're unhappy, etc. And then you look at where the conversation is, and it's still very much there. As you said, I think LinkedIn is. I also feel quite comfortable on LinkedIn. It's kind of like a friendly community where you can share your expertise, but it's not where a lot of the policymakers and journalists think. Threads is beginning, and Blue Sky, I think, is not really there yet. What are your thoughts of where the conversation is moving, and what would your advice be in terms of where people should focus, or how they should approach choosing the right channel?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It's X. Should I stay or should I go? And what I found with that is that you have to look at where people are. I think that's what policymakers are doing, because policymakers need to speak to voters and to those kinds of communities. And right now, people are still on X. The same challenges, in a sense, I have in building a Discord community is getting people to migrate from one to another. And people don't want to put that effort in to go through a learning curve and to build their network and to add all of their network again on a new platform. It's a lot of work. So that's why I think whether people like or dislike Elon Musk, they like using X because that's what they're used to. Policymakers are reflective of that. So they're going to stay on X when the audience is there. And for policy influencers who need to go where the policymakers are, that still will be platforms like X. We've now seen as well, I think about 2 weeks ago, the European Parliament is back on TikTok. And even though TikTok has these, geopolitical dimensions to it, and they have to go where the audience is going to be for the upcoming European elections. So, there's different dynamics there that are influencing decisions. LinkedIn, of course, it's a very different kind of audience. But one thing worth noting with LinkedIn that I've found is that there's more policymakers right of center that are going to be more active on LinkedIn than left of center. And, if we think about the upcoming European elections, and we might get to that in a bit more detail later, it's looking like there might be a swing to the right. Now, if that's the case, that might only double down and reinforce the influence of LinkedIn, given the slight shifts in what certain percentages of the ideological chain are using LinkedIn. So that's something to kind of keep note of. But it's an interesting one. It's a dynamic one. And you have to look at platform risk as well. If you put all of your eggs in one basket, then you're risking the engagement that you have if a CEO was to say something about their platform and everyone leaves it or vacates it. How much of your network time are you doing and are you building there versus maybe building it out a bit just in case, and then it gives you at least a platform for engagement. Otherwise, if you need to abandon it and go somewhere else. It's a very kind of fluid situation, and technology is changing as well, and it's going to influence and probably disrupt social media too. So it's worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your main statement, which is go where your audience is, I think is the starting point. However much you might dislike a platform, that should not be the criteria for you selecting it or not selecting it. I think a lot of people have abandoned X out of emotional dislike or ideological position, but as a communicator, I think you just need to understand where the conversation is. I think that because of the election, the fragmentation is going to increase, but the intensity is going to be in a lot of the platforms that differ. There's going to be one issue that will kind of blow up on X, then another one that will go more on LinkedIn. And I think you just need now to be having an open mind and looking at different places until I think after the election, we might see a new landscape, but I suspect it will be fundamentally fragmented. Now, we just mentioned the election. I mean, how disruptive do you think the election is going to be to what we do as communicators and to the communication environment that we're operating in?
I don't think it's going to be too disruptive. Do you mean the aftermath of the election or the process that
whether we're going to see major changes and innovations, which sometimes do. The elections were, the Obama election was the social media election. Do you think there'll be a kind of big shift or a kind of fragmented, chaotic situation where people have no clue where to focus and have to focus on 15 channels at the same time? Any big trends you anticipate?
I think during the election, there could be some fragmentation like that, just to keep up to date on certain influencers in both politics and outside of politics. And they each will have their different preferred communications platforms. I think the real thing to monitor during that time is the narratives that emerge. And they emerge independently of the platforms themselves. So monitor those narratives. And if you also then take some time to understand your own priorities, you can then match them so that when a new policy cycle emerges after the elections, you'll be able to frame your priorities to fit the narratives that have emerged during the election cycles and that are going to influence the policy cycle to come. So what I think one of the big narratives that we're going to see here in Europe is European competitiveness. And what we have seen, say, the last commission was a real focus on sustainability and how that emerged through the Green Deal. And so much of policy and strategic communications evolved around framing narratives through that. While sustainability is going to continue to be an issue, because it is an issue that we have to deal with, European competitiveness is something that's really driving forward. And I think for all communications professionals now, they think about their policy priorities and consider how to frame them in a narrative that supports a European competitive agenda, then that will probably sit them in good stead for the upcoming policy cycle.
Okay, and when you meet young people who start in the profession, when they're beginning their career, what's your kind of top advice to them to be happy, be successful? I don't know in which order. What do you tell them to focus on?
Well, being happy is quite a big topic. I suppose to advance, I suppose, in public affairs, one thing that's worth doing when you're younger is to lean into technology, because I think technology is disrupting communications. It's disrupting modern communications. It's disrupting how we analyze policy and how we engage with stakeholders. And when you're younger, you have to look at what your advantages are. So younger people are naturally stronger at adopting technology, and that can lead to an advantage against older cohorts. You'll have the older members of the team that will come to the younger professionals because they understand it. So lean into technology. One of that is artificial intelligence and how we use it in public affairs. But in using artificial intelligence, I think we have to be careful. And I would also recommend to younger people to make sure you focus on improving your critical thinking, because critical thinking matched with the augmentation of capability that artificial intelligence can bring is a really strong match. Artificial intelligence can be used to create a lot of content, but it takes a discerning mind to understand what content is useful and how we can apply it in strategic communications. Aside from that, don't neglect the soft skills of being able to meet people, being able to form bonds. In an AI-driven world, I think being able to have that human touch and to put yourself forward from a place that builds authenticity and trust is going to be important. So never neglect your network as well. Networking is something that it's even more important when you're younger, because a bigger network when you're younger, you can leverage it for a longer time as well. And your network really drives a lot of the value and the engagement that you can bring.
That's great advice. I'm a big fan of critical thinking, and I think actually philosophy is coming back as a core skill, because if you can analyze an issue, understand its meaning, you're able to better prompt an AI to say, this is the framing that I need from you. This is the way I want you to analyze, but you don't need the knowledge of the technical side, but you need the meta understanding. So very good point, as well as networking. So thank you for that. Now we will move to our recommendations. So I'll start with you, Irem, on the International Women's Day. What is your recommendation? I know it has nothing to do with that, but still, go ahead.
Actually, my recommendation has nothing to do with anything we discussed today, but I know some of our listeners and viewers know that it's the Oscar season, and it's actually the award ceremony happening this Sunday. So my recommendation is related to that. It's a YouTube channel that's called Oscar Expert, which is a channel dedicated to providing analysis, predictions, and commentary on the Academy Awards, Oscars, but also beyond that, all the other awards that have been going on for a while. And the film industry as a whole is created by two brothers, and they offer in-depth coverage of film reviews, talking about the run-up to the film festivals, the industry trends, and all of that. So I think it's very interesting for both casual moviegoers that just enjoy watching movies, but also dedicated cinephiles like myself. And they do very nice analysis, quite top level if you want, but also going into details too. And that's going to be a channel that I'll be watching quite a lot this weekend.
So can I ask you for your prognosis of the big winner of the Oscar season?
I think it's no surprise that Oppenheimer will probably be the big winner for most of the categories this year, but I think there will be some surprises. We'll see. But I think for Best Picture and Best Actor and Cinematography, Oppenheimer will probably get the trophy.
And you can follow Irem on Instagram if you want to know her thoughts on the Oscar as she moved along. So, Stephen, what are your recommendations for our audience?
Well, actually, I have two recommendations. We touched upon artificial intelligence a little bit, and that's really disrupting strategic communications and a lot more. But my first recommendation is a podcast show and a YouTube show and a podcast called The AI Breakdown. And it's a daily show that the host curates a lot of content around the latest developments in the technology, but then also the competition around that space and a lot of the policy and regulatory debates that happen. So it's something that I use to keep my mind fresh on what's changing in AI. I have the second recommendation, which also touches upon the Oscar theme. It's a film called The Wind That Shakes the Barley. And you might be asking, why am I recommending a film from 2006? Well, the film stars Cillian Murphy, who is an Irish actor who is also up for an Oscar for his portrayal of Oppenheimer. Hopefully he's gonna win that. He can bring it home. But as a film, it tells the story of the Civil War in Ireland, which is about 100 years ago. And from an EU election point of view, anyone who's not familiar with the situation, the film is a great way to understand some of the political dynamics that impacted Ireland 100 years ago and really shaped Irish politics for the last 100 years. So the current government we have is a coalition between the two main political parties. And it's the first time they've ever been in coalition together, because for the last 100 years, they were legacies of the Civil War that we fought between us. So it's a great way to peer into Irish politics and maybe shape some of the ways you communicate to Irish policymakers. Fantastic.
Maybe you can understand what's happening with Brexit and Northern Ireland and the politics there, which is...
Yeah, the genesis of North-South divide in Ireland, for sure.
Absolutely, incredibly complex. So I have one recommendation, which is a website called perplexity.ai, and it's actually, I'm sure that it was mentioned on the show you just mentioned. I heard about it on Hardfork, and it's a search engine based on AI. So it's an answer engine or a knowledge engine, where when you enter your search term, it will basically answer your search query by looking at different sites and kind of coming up with a coherent answer. Apparently, it's the talk of the town in Silicon Valley. I've tried it a few times. Interesting. Whether this is going to become a replacement for other search engines is yet to be seen, but apparently it has a lot of potential. So that's all we have time for. I hope that everybody has a fantastic weekend. I will see you all online on Discord, on LinkedIn, on Threads, on Blue Sky. or wherever you like to spend your time. Have a fantastic weekend. It was been great to have you on the show, Stephen. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, Stephen. So thank you very much for that. I think it was some very good content. So that's, I think after we kind of get the script, we write